All right, so this is like I don't know, kind of minimal tech, minimal neuro drum and bass tune that I've been sitting on for a while. So I'll just walk through it and kind of talk about how I did what I did and why, etc. So starting at the top. Go through the arrangement. Okay, so this is the way that I have projects generally set up. We'll see how intact this one still is. Up here I've got, okay, so you notice one thing, first of all, that the most of, I think there's one channel that isn't, yeah, this one, but the rest of the tune is all printed out into audio. So I've used the VSTs and different stuff to make sounds and then save them as an audio track and then work just with the direct audio clips in the channels. That's a good idea to do for a couple of reasons, or do that for a couple of reasons. One is that it's less resource intensive for your computer to process a bunch of channels of audio files that'll then have processing and stuff on top of them. Then if the VST or whatever was running live, creating that, it just takes more resources on your computer. That's not really the issue for me. It's more like, well, that is an issue like for plenty of people, and I've worked for years before on laptops that definitely required you to print stuff to audio and then work with the audio tracks. But it's also a good idea because if you make the sound, you shape the sound to where you like it, and then you commit to audio. It's commitment, and we've all heard about why that's good in different aspects of life, right? And it helps with making music too. Rather, it helps if you're prone to like, oh, you could endlessly tweak your VST, poke it a little bit, and change it and never feel like it's, done or something. Whereas if you make the sound and get it to a spot that you're happy with and then just print it to audio, then that's that, move on to the next one. So it helps with commitment and getting tunes finished to turn stuff into audio stems and then work with that. So the way that I do that, and I still have, like this channel, say this one isn't into audio yet. So this one is a vocal sample here. You can hear it here. Let's see. The lower version of it here. Yeah. So what I would do then is I've worked with okay, so I have the sample. In this case, what did I do? Oh, I loaded up some Lane anime, sample because I'm incredibly original. Let's see. I had a couple samples here. I'm using the multi-sample technique where I have the Ableton sampler open here, and I have two samples loaded into the sample pool in the zone here, the sample zone. And then I'm using the select function. You have key, velocity, or select function for selecting between different samples. And here I have the two of them doing the right-click distribute ranges equally thing. There's only two samples in this case, so it just spreads the blue bars of selection out into two different sides. And then using the selection bar at the top here, where you can select through up to 128 different samples in the sampler, I just did the group, like taking the sampler, Control G or right click group function, and then it gives you these knobs in an instrument rack. And then I did the right click on the sampler function up here and mapped to macro 1. So now I have that sample selector mapped on a knob here. There's only two samples in it. I don't know why I mapped it to the knob, I guess. You can map it to the knob, and then I have automation done. It can automate that, which what did I do here? Oh yeah, no, here I made two versions of the same sample. So one of them is just changed a little bit for the lower thing, and then you can see I have the automation going here to select that other sample here with the knob up here. And you can do the automation just directly from the sample selector thing here. The sample selector strip here, you can automate just directly from that, but you can also put it on a knob. If you're using a MIDI controller with knobs on it, you can then assign that knob to the controller and then, flip through the samples using the knob, or just automate from here, whatever. So that's what I've done in this case. Yeah, let's hear these two different samples. So there's this one, the first sample, this one, and then there's the second one, this one. What did I do differently in those cases? No, I guess I just was using a different, I don't really know. It looks just like I just have some different timing, just a different selection of the sample made here, so that it plays right away. And this one is playing the full like intro and the long part of the section, the long section here before the actual sample here. But anyways, then with this sample, I'm using the resonator plugin, this funky esoteric resonator called Pi Warp that I've mentioned before. It's like a weird plugin, but I love it and use it sometimes for this resonation effect here. You can really hear it on this one. If I turn it off, yeah, you can really hear it there. So this is the original one, you know, and then I'm using this resonator to totally change it. Again, resonator, it's adding resonant frequencies to, it's adding more sound to it and resonating, like echoing it in different spots. So yeah, I have this resonator plugin here. The settings I'm using on the resonator plugin aren't really important because this is the kind of thing you just play with until you find something where you think, oh, that sounds cool, and then there you go. Then into a simple delay and a reverb. Using this Eventide black hole reverb. That doesn't matter. What does matter is I'm using a reverb at about, like 30%. This is real common, like 30, 40, 30% dry wet amount, because that's kind of, these aren't like, numbers you have to follow, but like, 25 or 30% dry wet of an effect like this is, that's generally like pretty good. You're getting a third of the sound processed by the reverb or the delay, which is generally like enough to give it a good sound mixture. Whereas if you turn it up to 50% or higher or something, then you're getting way more reverb. It generally kind of drowns out the sound in a lot of ways. Sometimes you totally want that as like, if that's the effect you're going for, is the sound like really drenched in reverb or really, to give it like the really washed out or underwater kind of feeling, or sounds or muffled kind of sound like that, then sure, you might want to crank the reverb up, But in this case, I'm using it just about 30%. And this is the other important part. I'm using the slope of the reverb here. I should turn this to low cut. Using these EQ bands down here in the reverb to shape what's being processed, because this is set at what, 250 hertz, 240 hertz up here, meaning that it's an EQ. So everything below that is not being processed into the reverb, which is good because with this high, vocal sound and stuff, and generally low sounds anyways with the reverb, I don't want that to be part of the reverb anyways. What's important is this higher material here, and I'm also sloping off the highs a little bit here as well, because yeah, you also just don't want the full range of sound being processed by a reverb or a delay often, because it's just too much. It's just like too overwhelming. Or, really it is, but also because this high frequency area, like, above 5K and stuff, what are we at, 7K here? Above like 5, 6K and up, and below 300 hertz down below that, these are just like really high noise and like really low kind of rumbly noise and stuff too. And so they don't actually sound very good in a reverb. Like they don't sound good echoed and amplified and stuff. So you're kind of shrinking it down to this range. Anyways, but yeah, delay, vocal effect into resonator into delay and reverb, and then just the typical same kind of processing. A little gain management there, some EQ-ness done to it. In this case, yeah, you can see I have this dip point here in the EQ because there was this high band. You can see here, I'll kind of pause it with this. You can see there's this high band, this 582 hertz band there that was just a loud part of that. And so I reduced that area a little bit, just to kind of shape the sound to, sound how I wanted it. And I raised the highs a bit to give it a bit more of that high air kind of sound. Yep. I would even shrink this down a little bit like that, maybe. Yeah, what it is, is that this resonator is adding a lot of resonant frequencies to it. But then those resonant frequencies can, be too much and they can get ugly and out of control. So I'm just doing a little shaping with the EQ here for that. Yeah, and then into glue compressor, raising the makeup gain a bit and just soft clipping it. Oops, just soft clipping it a little bit here. You can see, just a tiny bit. Again, that soft clipping, or at least having the the clip activated. And in this case, I'm clipping the sound a little bit. I mean, you can tell basically by how much the light is lighting up, and in this case, I'm really not smashing it or crushing the sound or anything. I'm just clipping it a little bit, but that keeps it at a clipped high level, which means that I can, then play it back in the channel at any volume, and it will not clip over 0, and it's fits into the mix at whatever volume I choose to play it at. So with that said, so I've done my work with the sound here as an example, and then I've got so I've done my sound design process, I've got my automation and stuff done here, and I've got it all ready, and I say, okay, yeah, this is where I want it to play here, and then here, and here, and here. I have my MIDI notes, I have it all set up in the tune the way I want it to be. So then what I would do is I would turn it into audio, and the way I would do that is I would select it and duplicate it. And then the duplicated track, I right click and hit bounce track in place. It's called Ableton. I don't know why in Ableton 12 they changed it to bounce track in place. It used to in previous, I think 10 and 11 or 9, 10, and 11, it used to be called freeze and flatten. A lot of people use the term bounce. I actually don't really like the term bounce. I just think it sounds kind of dumb, but I mean, it's whatever. Bounce in place, freeze, flatten, flatten to audio, bounce it, whatever. Point is that it does that. It turns it into audio. I just think bounce sounds kind of silly. But anyways, it bounces or freezes it and flattens it. Yeah, and before 12, it was called freeze and flatten. It's the same thing. And why didn't it put the title of the channel into the bounce? I don't know, but whatever. Point being, there, it flattens it out into audio. What you missed there before, too, was it flattens it, and it's kind of broken up into these pieces. So, yeah, like this, you see that it takes every MIDI note then that was played, and it flattens it to audio, like this, but then it also has this division here where it's the main part of the sound and then the tail of the reverb, essentially, and not essentially is what it is. The tail of the reverb here is separated. Now that's fine because this is a crossover between the two clips that you don't hear. But you can move your mouse down to where it turns into this little bracket shape like that, the little bracket shape on the end. And then you can drag it over to turn that into just the one audio piece that it is. And because this is all actually recorded as one thing, you can actually just drag that all the way over and turn all of that into one audio stem. It won't, because there's nothing in front of it, it won't stretch out in that direction in front of it, but it'll do everything behind it like that. But yeah, you can stretch it out, or you can just run it out into one long piece of audio like that, or you can just do the one, piece of audio like this, and then you can do that for the rest and kind of like delete that, do it again for this one, delete what's nothing in the middle, do it again here, delete the nothing there, do it like this, delete that. You know, so I go through, clean up the audio like that. You can do it from either direction too. You know, you can click on the big one and drag it that way. So I'd go through and clean up the audio stems like this, just for appearances, whatever. The tail of that, you can see that in this case, we are having the reverb tail run out long, you know, of this sound here. But as you can see, as the line indicates too, by the time we're here, we're getting like negative 50 dB and stuff too. It's really like nothing. So you could shrink it down to like, you know, something like this and even adjust the fade or whatever on the end of it, you know, for however. Sounds good, you know, sounds fine. So yeah, so there we go. Now we have the instrument before, turns it into audio, and we have our audio stems. Oh, crap, I forgot to do that. Okay, now this is what we do. Before we break it up like that, I was going to change the name. That's right, yeah, right click or Control R, rename, and call that, you know, vocal vox, you know, sample, you know, sample one or something like that, whatever. And then, yes, and then chop it up into our pieces, you know. Because if you do it as one, then it's all labeled like that. But if you break it up into small chunks before, then you have to go through and relabel every one of them. So there we go. Anyways, and now, see, now I have, this is what I do, is I have this channel labeled as the vocal, you know, or whatever, instrument, you know, and then this one, I would just change the name, just like change it, you know, to like whatever, vocal one or something. Because now I have the audio to work with. Now, the instrument one, what I do is I save it, because committing to audio, like I said before, is good. It's a good idea, you know, commit it to audio. And then, you know, it helps you commit and move forward in the track and stuff. But what if you do want to go back and change something? What if you do want to go back and say, oh, you know, I actually made some mistake with this audio. I should change this, like the reverb is too much or whatever, you know, something you want to change with it. Well, then I actually keep the instrument version of it. So what I do then is I'll take, that's why we duplicated it rather than just freezing and flattening or bouncing the track itself. That's why I duplicated it and flattened the duplicate, so that the original I can take and I will select it. I will select the instrument or whatever's, you know, the far left one, select that, and make sure you're selecting the whole outer rack of it, not just the inner one, but the outer rack of it. And then Control A to select all, Control G to group everything, and then it puts everything, it puts the whole channel strip into a big group. And then I use the minus key and the O to shrink it and turn it off. Now you can do that the same way too. You can also just like double click to open it, or use this button here, use the plugin window button to close it and turn it off manually like that. But I will just group the whole channel into one rack, shrink it down and turn it off, so that this is no longer using any computer processing power. It's no longer running. It's no longer on or activated. And I will go over here then and right click, and I will turn the channel gray, and then turn off the channel itself here and shrink it down, and there. Now we have an instrument copy saved of the original in case we ever want to go back and manipulate it for some reason, but it's not taking up any resources in the computer and it's not involved in the production and stuff. We have the audio thing to work with. And then, as you may notice up here in the top, I have a big group called instruments in general, and then I'll take that instrument when I'm done with it and put it up there. Boom. You know, I could even put it down in kind of order somewhat for where the, in order for where it was in the arrangement, someone. So I will print my stems to audio, work with the audio, but then save copies of save backups of all the instruments themselves up here, turned off, out of the way, silent like that, in case I need to go back and make an edit to it. And I feel like this is a good technique because, like I said, it allows you to commit and work with audio and save resources by not running with 12 VSTs or whatever open, all running at the same time, and you're slowing down your computer, making it struggle, but you're saving copies of it to go back and make any future edits or changes with. So then we have that audio channel here, and it prints it to audio the exact same way it would have come out with all the processing on the instrument channel itself. But as you notice, if we click on it, there's no audio effects on it. So I will go back and put just the typical processing that I use on it. The, again, the gain staging, EQ, and a little output gain staging. So I can go through again and select the sample. Again, just a reminder, you can select the sample, double click up here in the magnifying glass thing. It'll zoom into it. But anyways, you can select it with or solo it with the S over here and listen to just that. And I'll adjust the EQ a bit, to taste. Yeah, there we go. Do a bit of EQing on it. Check the in and output level for volume. That sounds fine. So I'll do, just my little basic EQing or whatever I want in addition to it, to the audio there. And then it's ready to be just, mixed in the piece. One other thing is when you do print it to audio, Ableton will naturally automatically put it as this of having an input to it of something. This isn't essential, but just something that I do because I'm not recording anything into this. I'm not putting any input into this channel. So I will just go up here in the channel input section, the in and out section for the channel, go up here and select it and just hit no input and turn it off. By default, Ableton will just put it as some input extension in when you bounce it to audio. So yeah, there you go. Then I have my sample here, my processing, my output level for the channel here, and it's in the mix. They're ready to go, Yeah, so that is what I do with stuff to turn it into audio and work with it from VST. And then just, cleaning up a little bit here, Yeah, so that is what I've done with everything else in this channel. I took the time to explain all that so that I don't have to re-explain it with everything else, because then you can see, well, that's what I did for all this stuff then. So that being said, what do I still have surviving in the instrument rack group up here? Kick. Looks like this kick I already printed to audio. What about this one? This one is just another kick. I think I was working with a sample, possibly. This one, oh, okay, no, the snare is still good. The sub is still good. Okay, yeah. So then going from top to bottom in the track again, I've got the kick snare bus like I talked about in drum and bass arrangements before, or drum and bass or any kind of EDM, loud dance floor focused stuff. I have the kick and the snare in their own bus and their own group here, so they're nice and loud and independent. Yeah, kick. I'm processing the kick. I am using a stereo imager to give it a little bit of width in the mids and make it mono in the low, sub 100 and 160, 100 and 150, 160 range, and mono in the highs above 5, 6K. and give it just a little bit of mid in this part here. Let's give it a little bit of width there so it's not completely mono. That's just, a matter of taste. And again, I talked about doing stereo imaging as another way of mixing your sounds together, where they mix together in terms of frequency range, but also in terms of stereo image space. Like, think of a wide bass that's wide to the sides, to the stereo sides, nesting, like coupling and nesting well with a mono kick, especially when they share the same frequency range. If you have a low frequency, thud of a kick and it's mono, and the bass is mono too, they will, they're competing for the same space because they're trying to occupy the same space, both in frequency range and also in stereo image. So you want to just make your choices that way of having, say, like a wide, like I'm just making examples, but like a wide kick and a mono bass, or vice versa, that kind of thing, or just nesting them together with a bit of stereo imaging processing. Yeah, then I have a tube amp, just giving a little bit of tube amp saturation on the kick here, and yep, just a little bit of amp saturation there. Nothing crazy distorting it or something. EQ, scooping the mids a little bit and reducing the sub of the kick a little bit, because it hits loud enough in the sub. And then the transient shaper, most important, giving a little bit extra whack, to the transient, increasing the attack a little bit. Transient shaper just really helps give it that additional smack, to the transient. And then here I've got a limiter on there. I should actually have the attack up a little bit to let some of the transient through. And then I'm crushing it a little bit, 6 dB, because it's letting a little bit of the attack through, so you get that smack of the sharp attack of the transient, of the kick, and the snare. Same thing for the snare too. But it's crushing it here with the limiter so that you're basically, it's hard, you can see this little slope, to the kick here. You can see there's a little slope. You can see there's a little slope in the range there of the sound. And so you're just crushing it with the limiter, again with compression to basically chop it to hear like a louder, consistent volume of the rest of the parts of the kick. It's just in music like this is giving it part of that really loud, powerful kick sound. Similar and very similar process for the snare, again with the limiter and stuff. And those things, doing it similarly. So yeah, then both of those kick snare pattern here, got this kind of shuffling pattern to it in this tune, which is fun. And then sub bass. Got this loud, distorted, wide sub sound in this one. Again, I'm giving it some. I'm actually reducing. But yeah, I'm reducing the width a little bit of the sub here in this case. Could be a lot wider, but same kind of process. Doing some stereo adjustment to it. Using an exciter in this to stimulate a little bit of this mid range too. Just gives it a little bit of a, extra kind of loudness, extra kind of presence to the sound. In the mid range, I'm using some distortion again in a mid band and high band distortion in Saturn, where I'm using this to actually give some distortion to it in the mids. Solo that. It's giving it that just saturating that mid band a little bit to give it a bit extra saturation or distortion in a low frequency sub. Helps it be audible, helps you hear it, because it's a low, otherwise it's a very low kind of clean sound. So having that extra distortion in there a little bit to taste is helping push it through. And then I'm scooping down the sub a little bit. It's quite loud, and just balancing it a bit with EQ, and then into limiter that's just clipping some of the peaks there so you can have a loud kind of constant volume, but it still has dynamic range of the sub coming in and out, but I'm just kind of clipping it a bit to kind of even it out a little bit. You can see in this case, I did a manual sidechaining where I actually just cut the spot where the kick was. So you can see the bass frequency when it's recorded, the sub bass was like this. You know, this one long sub blast. And then here's my kick here. And you can see that kick, you know, hit is mainly right here. This tail is like not much, you know, right there. But I just cut manually like this and hit the 0 key to turn it off instead of deleting it. You can do whatever. But yeah, I mean, you know, if you're sidechaining something like the kick to the bass where you want it completely reduced in volume when the kick hits, I mean, this is like sidechaining too. This is another way of sidechaining, just turning it off, just, you know. So you hear that cutting in the sub bass, but then when it's put together with, you know, the kick and stuff. Yeah, so kick and bass sidechained. Okay, the sub, do I still have the sub instrument here? I do. Let's take a look at that. This is a very simple thing. Again, it's just a sine wave with, well, do I have this mixed in there too? Basically, it's just using like a distortion. Oh, I have some unison width to this sub here, like this. So let's solo this instrument, turn it on, and then turn on the whole instrument rack that it's on so we can hear it. And then we should hear it. Oof. Yeah, that doesn't sound right though. Yeah, I mean, that's the sub. Yeah, I think it was just like that, just having this unison, three voice unison saw wave adjusted in a little bit for that kind of Reese width, and then just this pure sine wave sub with some distortion and EQ on it. And then, yeah, just playing a real simple bass line of just the root note in this case. And I had some old multi-band plugins dead now, just some EQ to it. And yeah, in this case I had, yeah, in this case I had this LFO here, just fluctuating the level of the saw wave or sine wave to give it some wobble, you know. Just like that. In this case, I mean, this is like a minimal narrow bass kind of tune style, so it's not like it's kind of like a minimal bass pressure kind of bass, but yeah, that combined with just in that extra distortion that I was doing here, and you know, with on the mid band, gave it that sound of, you know, that like, and yeah. And I've reduced the sub a bit in the output to get the low bass frequency of it to focus more on the mids of the sub. So yeah, but that's, you know, I have that instrument there saved. Boom, turn that back off, bring this thing back up like that. But yeah, that's kick, bass, and sub. Kick and snare and sub. Setting the basic vibe of the tune there. And then let's see, because I could yak on about stuff for a long time. I'll just try to get, you know, through this. So, okay, then as normal, I have in like a drum and bass, you know, or dance floor like tune like that, I've got kick and snare in their own group, in their own bus, in their own group, and then the sub solo, and then everything else I have into a sidechain bus that is getting some sidechaining with, in this case, with a shaper box. from the kick and the snare separately, which I have coming from triggers up here. In this case, like I said, I don't have a trigger going to a sidechain device on the sub because I just did the manual cuts for it in this case, like I see, where I cut the sub there manually for the kick. So I just have the kick trig here and the snare trigger here. Again, those are just copies of the pattern played for the kick and the snare, but being played as blank MIDI channels with the MIDI channel with just the notes on it, not playing anything, but they are still moving, they're still playing. You can see this flashing over here, indicating, the MIDI output. And then that is being sent here in the ins and outs, being sent to the sidechain bus, being sent to the shaper box, one or two. I have two of them, one for the kick, one for the snare. And then you can see in the sidechain bus, if I open that up, you can see it triggering here. But it's, that's where it's, yeah. You can see the MIDI trigger here. But anyways, that's what I'm using for the sidechaining. And this case in the sidechain bus, just to move that a little bit. See, I have it like 60% for the kick and a little more for the snare. Because this doesn't have, the sidechain bus doesn't really have any low frequency information in it, because that's just in the sub and the kick. So everything else in the sidechain bus is just like this. It actually has this EQ, which is not adjusted. Okay, no, I'm gonna get rid of that. This is like old enough that I have Pro Q4 in this rack now too, and it's automatically set to be at 120 hertz. Let's make it 110 or whatever. So yeah, high pass filter, high pass cut for the EQ. Because any of that sub information there is really not important, and I actually don't want it from this the Neurobait. There are respaces. I actually don't want the sub there to be interfering with the sub bass, because if you see, if I'm playing this with no sub information, but then it's playing with the sub, then yeah, the sub is playing the sub. So that's how those mix together. Yeah, using the ring mod sidechain method, which I'll have to go through one day. But yeah, so then everything else in the sidechain bus. So what else do we have there? We got the vocal sample that we talked about before that we went through, like that. We have a percussion line here. Clicky little percussion line. Do I have that here? I don't think I actually do. I think, okay, the percussion line, I don't really remember how I made that actually in this case. A lot of times what I'll do is I will find a break, some kind of drum break that I find like for inspiration and, for a nice rhythm, or recreate something myself, or even chop it up and resample it, for something. So I have this click, just this click with a, this part here does this cool pitch modulated spot where there are some higher and lower notes for the hi-hats. So it does this kind of like da-da-da-da, kind of, little somewhat melodic thing. Yeah, basically playing some different percussion hits and hi-hat hits back, but then giving this section, playing them like in a sampler, but at different pitches, like notes higher and lower and stuff. Yeah, and just giving it this kind of shuffling rhythm that on its own sounds kind of bare, but with the kick and snare. Yeah, and okay, no, I remember for this one, I found a drum break sample that had this rhythm to it, this kick snare shuffle pattern, this do da do da, shuffle pattern to it. And then I recreated it using my own samples, basically chopped it up and did my own kind of version of it. But I found like inspiration in the rhythm from another sample and thought like, oh, that's cool, I like that. So then I just made my own version of it, basically. Yeah, and that's this little hi-hat percussion line from it. What else? Okay, and then the bass part, the Reese bass, all that stuff here. Yeah, this is basses that I recorded. As you can see here, like this one is like I used to call my music project when I was making this stuff was Missive or MSV, and so it's like, me, neuro bass, D minor, 11, 13, 22. Oh, yeah, it's this old recording I used. So you can see I did sound design sessions where I recorded a bunch of basses, made a bunch of varieties, recorded stuff, and then later you can go through and use that in songs like this one. Like this track is, in D minor, and I can, just use parts of the bass chopped up, as you can see, chopped up to find spots that fit. I've gone over that before, where you can have a bass sample like this, for example, and then what I'll do is I'll drop the whole sample in like this, I have this long take sample like that, and turn it off with the 0 key, so it's gray like this, not playing. And then you can say, well, I want a bass hit here, like right there. And then I turn that section on and I play that. And then in Ableton, you can also hold Control Shift, hold down Control Shift, and then your mouse turns this little hand, and then you can drag, you can scrub through the sample to be like, well, what about there? Like, oh, that's cool. Well, what about this section? And that's how you can scrub through different parts of a long sample, but in this little section where you want the bass hit to be. So that's the technique that I use a lot in this kind of thing. That's what I used, here, basically, to just find like bass samples, bass parts that work well together. You can see I have a stack of 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case to make actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this bass bus to give variety, because that's generally what you do in a case like this. You don't just have one bass line playing all that complex sound. That's part of what people get confused about, is they will hear a complex bass line in neuro funk or something, or dubstep, and they'll think like, well, that bass is so crazy, how do they, how is that being done? It's generally like layers of a couple. I mean, it's not always, but it's oftentimes layers of a couple sounds. You have like 4 or 5, in this case, like 5 different bass sounds, just being played in different times, and that helps create, different interesting parts. So, like in this case, in this one here, I've got this thing, just like this weird little bass part, and this one I got this. This one I got these little fills here. Yeah, just these little bass turns in different spots. And then this bass part here. This one here. Yeah, and then I just have them all layered together, so they are sounding, like this big, one big part like this, this. Yeah. Reese bass design and neuro bass design, like this is a topic for another video for sure, because it's it's definitely a deep topic and stuff. Just know that the essential concepts of it. Do I have anything actually here? Yeah, see. Okay. Okay, so in this case, like generally just like how this kind of stuff is done. Like I have a pattern that I was playing here. Just saying like, okay, I had a pattern here playing some notes like the root note, you know, D, E, F, just playing, I don't know, just came up with some pattern that I was playing some bass notes in. And then I did a bunch of recording. You can see here I was using a bunch of different plugins like a saturator and reverb and amp and another saturator and a bunch of different stuff, experimenting with it to record. Oh, what bass was this even? This looks like this was a preset actually that I was using as a bass. You can often use presets, sure, like using presets, if you just like record a preset and make tunes with it, then you may not feel very satisfied because you're not actually doing any sound design. But preset can also be just a starting point for a sound design. Like you may just scrub through a preset or flip through some preset and find like, oh, this one's cool. And then change it, do something to it yourself to make it, to just change it your own way and use it. Save it to audio, make an audio, print some audio with it, and then manipulate it even further. And then you're totally not just making music from presets. You're using it as a basis for inspiration to start with. So what did I have in this case? If I turn it all back on, if it actually works, let's see here. This may not actually be anything. Let's see. If I turn it all on, what is this? Okay, in this case, I think this was just bass one. I think this was just using like was it this? Maybe? No. Was it this? Nah, I don't really remember. Yeah. Essentially, basically, I promise I will make a separate lesson about neuro and bass design because it's a whole topic in itself. But essentially, the way that goes is you come up with a MIDI pattern like this, say just playing like the root note and playing some little pattern with it. And then you are experimenting with, generally the concept is you are using the unison function, this unison voice again, to make multiple unison voices playing together to give it that wide sound thing. And then using filters like a notch filter, especially a notch filter like this notch, to really like scoop and separate frequencies and moving it around. Essentially, that's kind of the gist of, and then distortions. So notch filter to remove frequencies, and then distortion to add them back in, and essentially just playing with that, and then resampling, like, saving it to audio and then adding a little more distortion and some more filtering to it. That's essentially just how all that stuff is done. And then just a lot of experimentation. So that's a topic for another video, but essentially that's it. How I created these basses and then just arrange them in a mosaic of what sounded, cool to me in the technique that I mentioned before. And then, yeah, then they're into the bass bus here. That was the main focus of the tune, obviously, is making the bass, the neuro bass part fit along with the sub and the kick to make an overall, just like those things are like 90% of the tune already. So having that done, that's like the big part of writing the tune. And then yeah, then the rest I had a synth part for the intro and break part where I made an ARP, an arpeggio here. As you can hear, it's doing just a low pass filter sweep in, and I think I have it here. Yeah, there we go. So I got this here. Some dead plugins that no longer on the computer. I've got this Okay. Click on this, open it up. You can see I made an arpeggio in this case manually between just, yeah, D, E, and F like that. These three notes over and over again. And then just moved the third note up higher to give it that movement in the first and second parts. It's unison saw voice with another one with LFOs plucking the filter and the envelope, very quick envelope on the sound, so it sounds like. So you see it's a very short envelope that is making a quick pluck of the sound, and then I have automation happening or some macros that macro one, what was that? Yeah, for the filter cutoff. So I'm just, it's pretty simple. Playing an arpeggio, you know, a couple notes, you know, over and over again, da 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 da, like that, on a very quick, quick plucky envelope, and then just like opening the filter slowly over time to give it movement and stuff. I had some additional filter here, like I had this one filter here, and this OTT doesn't matter. That was just some, you know, little multiband processing done to it. That's not important actually. I had a distortion plugin here, giving it some distortion. And then just a filter doing some additional filtering to it that would have just, you know, filtered it a bit more. But yeah, basically pretty simple. Just giving that arpeggio movement sweep in with the low pass filter here, and then I recorded it out to audio like I showed, you know, where it sweeps in. Yeah, layered with a few other things. So a pad. Another pad. Yeah, these pads are up here. Pad 1 and 2. Yeah. Let's see here. What do we got here? Okay, more dead plugins. Okay, this is just a reverb and OTT, not important. And gave it a bit of distortion and a bit of filtering, not really important. What is important here? Playing this root note, playing this one note, and then using the low pass filter here with automation on it to just, you know, do the wall. And you can see, yeah, real simple, just a low note with a 7-voice unison, low pass filter, some delay, compression, reverb, distortion, just giving it a little flavor here. Turn the filter off. Yeah, so just filtering it, you know. Yeah, just using some low pass filtering. You'd be surprised how many times, you know, sound design is done using just real simple processes like that, like you know, filtering a sound to give it different, you know, to really totally change the character of it and give it variety. A very similar thing to pad number 2. Knowing me, I probably just made a duplicate of it and did something different to it, which is, you know, very common. Like here, do we have notes there? Yeah. Oh. Okay, so same thing. You can hear that low pass filter. Just stop. Okay, you can hear that low pass filter sweep. That, you know, sweeping in of the low pass filter down here. Although there's that pi warp again, like my little weird resonator plugin. Here being split, like I've used an example before where you can split it in an audio effects rack to have the clean signal coming through, and then the second duplicate of it with an effect on it. And then in this case, I'm automating the amount that effect is being played into the mix. So the sweep in there. Here you can see the rise here. So yeah, in that case, the resonator making that noise. So in that case, I'm just creating movement of the sound by blending, by turning up the amount of the resonator effect and turning it back down, up and down, and then into some filtering. The sound is yeah, the same, just a wide saw wave with some distortion, not even distortion, just some reverb, delay and stuff on it. Yeah. And yeah. But again, distortion, giving it a lot of like texture, and then movement with the filter to filter it in and out and make it sound different over time. And then a pad that was a copy of another pad, just processed differently to have some variety. And there we go. That's the pad. These two pads here, and then layered together. Just layered together into the synth bus here. And that's it for these sounds. Oh, drum fill. I think I just used a sample. Yeah, just a sample filtered here for this kind of intro drum fill. Yeah, I just used a drum break sample and then just did some filtering to it, just to having that high pass filtering, cutting out the lows, just to make it sound like it's creeping in, you know, kind of thing. And layered with another fill drum sample. Oh yeah. Using a bandpass, used a bandpass filter in this case to sweep through that filter. You know, bandpass filtering being this narrow band here that really filters out a lot of the sound and just sweeping it back and forth with some automation to give it that sweeping sound into a delay, of course. Bandpass filter into delay, classic, into some reverb, absolute classic. Anyways. And then for the arrangement, so that's it for the sounds, and then into the arrangement. So yeah, I made this kind of intro, you know, piece of like, we have this little melody, the like, no, 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 ARP thing, and the pads, you know, and the intro. Into a little break, you know, drum break. Into the drop, yeah. So pretty standard kind of arrangement of like, and you know, a feeling, a vibe, you know, of the intro. Yeah, this interesting turnaround here. This part with the ARP there, I just turned the pitch up, you know, and towards the end, so it just did this like higher and higher, you know, rise in the end like that. You know? And then put in this little drum break here, pre-drop, and then just drop the whole thing. Yeah, I'm not a fan of like huge buildups and stuff. Like I really hate like snare drum risers and stuff like that. You know, it's just me. I don't really like, you know, like big deal risers and, you know, buildups and stuff. So I just generally don't write tunes like that. But yeah, you know, it's like that. Then I play the main part of the riff, you know, here. It just kind of changes over times, you know, a few times. You know, different bass parts, back and forth. But yeah, let's see, it drops here. It plays out for this long. You can see it's playing for 4 repetitions of it to just give kind of an even timing feeling. And the duration, it'll say down here if you select it, duration is 1 minute 29 seconds. So it plays for 1.5 minutes, and then you have this break, you know, in the middle. where it basically just drops, basically just goes back to the intro part. Although then the second drop, it drops with the melody of the intro. Yeah, just to create some variety, you know, it's like I put melody of the intro first, then the drop of the tune itself, and then played them again in the second half together. And then it just plays out again like normal for the rest of the second half, and then just drops out to the intro or the outro. Where the outro, I just played the same intro, but without the arp, you know, without the arpeggio. So just the same, you know, kind of just like fading out outro part. So yeah, that's it for the arrangement. Pretty simple. What else do I have? Oh, I've got a reference track up here, you know. I used a disprove reference track, I guess, for this, which should be this, you know. Again, I have the reference track being sent to the extension out directly out because I don't want it to be processed by the main master bus processing and stuff, because that totally defeats the point of hearing what your sound sounds like compared to the reference track. But then you guys don't hear it in the stream. But anyways, yeah, reference track loaded up there too to compare the mix to the reference track, as always. And yeah, that is the tune. Ta-da. Um, and yeah, so again, to recap, I, you know, made all my instruments and printed them to audio, and then saved backup copies of them in the instrument rack up here. And then save that, just turned off up there for future use if I need to use them or change something. And I've got my reference track up here to reference how my mix is sounding compared to what I want it to sound like. That I'll switch back and forth with to make those choices. And then I've got a kick and snare trigger here to trigger a sidechain device on the sidechain bus here, because I cut the sub manually for the kicks, so I don't need a sidechain device in the sub there. And yeah, that's then the arrangement part, you know, pretty typical, kind of simple arrangement. Oh, and then master bus, it's all going into the master bus, where I have, again, just typical, like some saturation happening, more saturation, another layer of subtle saturation to it, and EQ plugin, just doing some EQ shaping. I got the high shelf increased a little bit, just poking with some EQ points very lightly here to taste into a multiband plugin that's doing 33% parallel multiband compression. This is details and stuff I've kind of talked about before. That's not that important at this point. But yeah, just a bit of final mixing, mix down processing, a compressor and clipper here, and into a limiter, clipping limiter here. Yeah, and limiter, got my Vision spectrum analyzer software there that'll sometimes crashes my Ableton if it's being bad. I'll just try opening up again here. Let's say, yeah, there we go. Okay, that thing. So yeah, you can see all the frequencies are in the kind of normal loudness range for drum and bass there with this reference curve that's set there. And so I use that for making mixing decisions and helping just visualize the mixture of the sound. And yeah, that's it. So there you go. So yeah, ta-da! Thanks for checking that out with me. Hope you enjoyed. It's a lot of repeat processes and similar themes and concepts that I've talked about before, just, being put into practice in different forms and different tunes and similar things being done. So yeah, hope that was just really fun and enjoyable. But notes for the future, like I said, I will definitely do a session on bass design specifically because that's a whole thing to get into as well. Everything else is a little more straightforward. Um, and also mixing, doing mix downs and mix processing, uh, is another future topic for sure. So cool. Well, thank you for checking this out, and hope it was helpful. And again, any questions or comments or anything you want to talk about it, just hit me up. And yeah, take care.